Welcome everyone to our webinar on equitable EV action planning for Michigan communities. I'm really excited to be here with an amazing slate of panelists to talk about a new resource that's available and to talk about the importance of planning for not only EV action within a community, but doing that with equity and a amazing framework to make sure that municipal actions are meeting community needs. The webinar is hosted by Michigan Clean Fuels Institute and Michigan Clean Cities, and you'll hear more from Jeffrey about Michigan Clean Cities and the Drive Electric Michigan initiative in just a moment. My name is Jane McCurry, and I'm Executive Director at Clean Fuels Michigan and our sister organization, the Michigan Clean Fuels Institute. And together, our goal is to advance the clean mobility industry here in the state of Michigan through policy advocacy, education, and forging connections across the industry. Michigan Clean Fuels Institute is a new addition to our toolkit. We launched it last year, and so we're really excited to be hosting educational opportunities like this one through the Institute. Like I said, today we're here to talk about the Equitable EV Action Plan framework. This framework was published just a few months ago by the UC Berkeley Center for Law, Energy, and the Environment with input from several national leading organizations in the equity and mobility space, and with input from several local and state organizations like Clean Fuels Michigan and Michigan Clean Cities. And so though the Equitable EV Action Plan framework was published by a California entity and is looking at national work, it does have a lot of specifics to Michigan and references Michigan communities throughout the report. And so we wanted to host this webinar to share the report with you, let you know that it's a very deep resource that's available, and also to, again, bring it home to Michigan and share some Michigan leaders and share their knowledge with you so that you can use the framework to the best opportunity that it provides. And Jeffrey's going to talk a little bit more about this.
First up, like Jane mentioned, Drive Electric Michigan is also associated with this webinar today. And just to share some background on it, it's a program here in the state of Michigan funded by the Federal Department of Energy with a number of great partners, including Clean Fuels Michigan, as well as Consumers Energy, DTE, and the East Michigan Electric Vehicle Association. And it's dedicated to supporting the electric vehicle adoption throughout the state of Michigan by working with all these different types of stakeholders, including policymakers, utilities, dealerships, and most importantly, consumers. And it's led by Michigan Clean Cities, which I'm a really proud employee of as our program analyst leading these types of programs. But today we're focused on the EV Equitable Action Plan framework and sharing that out with communities throughout the state of Michigan. So just as it looks like, might be having a little trouble switching over to the slide, but to start off, I think there's really two ways to think about this framework. One is to really utilize it as a resource for other resources. I think anybody in the space right now in electric vehicles and honestly cleaner fuels and transportation generally, it feels like there's so much knowledge and great experience and expertise throughout the industry. So it provides quick access, just a quick Control F, search for whatever kind of resource that you might need. And it really highlights a few different steps that people should go through in developing their action plan framework, and especially creating a local focus for it. So these steps are really, I'll kind of break them down so that way I don't have to read through this whole paragraph. But number one, consulting the different internal government stakeholders that you'll need to be referencing, such as the planning department, transportation, and attorneys' offices. Number two, collaborating with other localities and referencing what they might be working on. Again, another resource within this resource. Number three, coordinating with your local CBOs, community-based organizations, including organizations like your local Clean Cities Coalition. Four, referencing existing resources for EV planning and implementation, and a big focus on this is different funding mechanisms. So throughout the framework, it references a number of federal, state, and even local incentives to support the implementation of electric vehicle adoption and EVSC. And number five, applying for that funding, actually staying up to date about the different funding opportunities. So resources can include, again, places like the Federal Department of Energy and the different funding opportunities that they publicize, as well as state opportunities that are shared as well. So again, this framework kind of focuses in on very specific resources, but overall it's meant to be a resource for creating a local strategy. So it really helps in my experience with municipalities of providing some capacity, honestly, because it can be really difficult for, when you're one sustainability manager or director for your locality and trying to really lead the development of an entire plan for how you can move forward in leading sustainable efforts, specifically related to electric vehicles, but electric vehicles and how that kind of flows into other resources and plans you need to develop, from recycling to waste, and even just community transportation generally, with things like public transit, walking, and micromobility. So I want to dive into a few specific resources. Like Jane mentioned, this plan was developed with feedback from partners across the country, but there's definitely a lot of engagement with Michigan partners like Michigan Clean Cities and Clean Fuels Michigan. So one target that the framework kind of points out is creating targets, actually, within these different sustainability or EV action plans that localities can create. And so there's a few Michigan references in the framework: Ann Arbor, the state of Michigan overall related to mobility, and Detroit's EV charging public engagement platform. So Ann Arbor's climate action plan, which they've termed Ann Arbor Zero, is a very comprehensive plan that is definitely a leading guide for what municipalities can do. But the best reference point for it really is the different targets that they make. And it's an interesting read to see how they honed in on what kind of focuses they really want to achieve with their plan. Yes, the specific tactics and strategies are important, but what's the end goal for this whole strategy and this plan for what the local community and residents and decision makers really want to achieve? And I also want to focus in on that Detroit EV charging public engagement platform. So again, the focus of this framework and what we really want to emphasize today with the webinar is ensuring that community voice and impact is prioritized with these plans. So this public engagement platform Detroit utilized to actually receive public input on where EV chargers, EVSC, should be placed within the city. So actually going out to residents and just asking. That's how simple it can be. Although obviously it requires building up the tool and putting in some hours to really want that engagement from the community. I'll also touch on target 2 here, community benefits, a little briefly, because another one of our panelists will be going a lot deeper into equity and how to really integrate that throughout the planning process. But Invest Detroit Strategic Neighborhood Fund, it is a philanthropic effort supported by the city of Detroit and other partners to really focus on creating equitable and community-centered neighborhoods, and really leaning into these groups and these funding opportunities can help to ensure that EV equity is not just focused on electric vehicles, it's not just focused on a specific group of stakeholders, but involves the entire community, that maybe EVs aren't their priority focus, but it can easily be seen as fitting into this kind of neighborhood vision, community vision for what it means to be in your locality or municipality.
My name is Brandt Hertenstein, and I am a program manager at the Electrification Coalition. You can go to the next slide. I'm here to talk about what municipalities are doing around the region to accelerate transportation and provide you with some resources, in addition to what Jeff has already provided, on ways that you can advance some of your transportation electrification goals. Next slide. Just for everyone's information, the EC, or Electrification Coalition, is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that develops and implements a broad set of strategies to facilitate the widespread adoption of electric vehicles to overcome the economic, public health, and national security challenges that stem from America's dependence on oil. Next slide. So the EC works at the local, state, and federal level. We have a policy team that works more on the state and federal level side of it, and we have a program implementation where I'm at that primarily works on the local and state level. So I want to start off by saying that the EC welcomes any opportunity with working with any of you on whatever topic you may need assistance on. I work with cities across the United States to accelerate transportation electrification work. This includes federal funding, although federal funding has dried up a little bit, fleet analysis for your entire fleet, infrastructure adoption and policy. But that's not all that the Electrification Coalition can do. We work on EV roadmaps, site assessments, EV readiness work plans, EV readiness ordinances on the policy side of it, take-home policies, zero emission vehicle plans, car share programs, and a host of many other things. We are very fortunate enough to work with municipalities, MPOs, utilities, states, and state departments that have allowed us to work on some really cool projects. And so the EC has captured some of those projects along with some others that we haven't worked on in a resource called Electrifying Transportation in Municipalities Playbook. I'll be going over that just a little bit later. But before we get into that, there are a lot of great resources out there to help us on our journey. And I wanted to highlight a couple of them there. So if you want to go 2 slides, Jane, and I will put all of these in the, I'm gonna go over them quickly. I'm gonna put all these hyperlinks in the chat. I hope this works well for y'all. And then I'm going to go into a screen share and kind of talk about them more. So for the federal resources, there's a few that I really wanted to highlight. The Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, which is the joint program between the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation, has a great infrastructure playbook. NREL, or National Renewable Energy Labs, has the EVIX modeling suite that has a variety of different tools that you can use. AFDC has the EVI Pro Lite tool that you can use, and I'll go into that just in a little bit. And then there's also Argonne National Laboratories GEM tool, which I did not include that, but it is in the hyperlinked version of it. If you want to go to the next slide, you've got the EC resources. I would say that our flagship resource is the Dashboard for Rapid Vehicle Electrification, or the Drive tool. This is a total cost of ownership tool for fleet electrification. So what it allows you to do is give us a couple of inputs, and then it'll go into our modeling system that we have with Atlas Public Policy, and it will the output will be what the differences in price would be versus a new internal combustion engine vehicle and an electric vehicle. We do have an EV funding finder. We update it when we can. You know, the most recent funding that's come out from the federal government that involves electric vehicle and electric vehicle infrastructure is the FTA Low-No Emissions and Bus Facilities Program. We are super excited that that came out because that's the first electric vehicle or electric vehicle infrastructure-based program that has come out for the new administration. That is close to $1.5 billion of funding for transit agencies. That's due July 14th, I think, if anybody's interested in it. And of course, if you are interested in it, we'd be more than happy to work with you on it. We also have an EV purchasing collaborative in a collaboration with Sourcewell. So if you need to procure any vehicles competitively, this is a great way to go about it. Oftentimes there's banks of electric vehicles that are open, and you can put in the number that you want to, and you can get a discounted price on electric vehicles. Well, based on what your MSRP is, at what other facilities that you possibly can procure from, and you can get your vehicles that way. And then finally, we do have that Electrifying Transportation in Municipalities toolkit that I'll go into. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. So this is the infrastructure playbook. I think this is an excellent resource from the Joint Office. As you can see, there's a variety of different topics that you can go on. Let's just go to engagement. That seems relevant for community members. And so this has a bunch of different activities that you can incorporate into your strategies. It's got videos of the Joint Office talking about them, and it's not just Joint Office that's talking about them, but a variety of different resources from people, and then additional resources that you can use. So incredibly helpful whenever you're thinking about what you're trying to do for your community engagement plan and other things that involve EV infrastructure. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the EVIX modeling suite. This is a suite that informs you on planning and development. So you can go into network planning, site design, or financial analysis for electric vehicle infrastructure. There's a variety of different tools down here that you can see. Here's all the network planning tools. Here's all the site design tools that you can use. Here's the financial analysis tool. So just within this suite of different programs, there's a variety of different things that you can hone in on. And if there's any questions that you have on any of these, I'm more than happy to help with you, probably offline. Then we can go to the EVI Pro Lite tool, which I think is super useful. Most of the time I use this in the metropolitan areas where, most of the programmatic things that I do come into play. And this essentially will give you, what kind of electric vehicle infrastructure, how much electric vehicle infrastructure are you going to need to plan for the future. You can do it based off level 2, level 3 charging, projected number of electric vehicles in your area. And so it's really interesting to go over the full gamut and iterations for what you're going to need in the future. The final one that I'll come up with on the federal resources is the GEM tool. This is a geospatial energy mapping tool. And this is a really like a GIS mapping tool that you can use, and it's really interesting, and you can use it beyond just electric vehicle infrastructure. But if you go and explore the catalog, you can see that there's a variety of different sources that it pulls into. For us, for electric vehicle infrastructure, you can pull every DC level 2 J3400, which is NACS, and then your J1772 level 2 charging stations. And then you can see that you can get sources from a variety of different federal locations. They update this as much as they possibly can. And so, you can go and look at what all of the electric vehicle infrastructures in your area is. And if you want to look at it from a geographical point of view, you can do that. You can also then overlay a variety of different other things. I know that I oftentimes do it for roads with the average daily vehicle traffic. So not only can I see where all the the electric vehicle infrastructure charging is, you can also look up planned electric vehicle infrastructure charging, and then you can overlay it with daily vehicle traffic to see what the utilization is for each one of those, for each municipal area that you're working with. So you can also do this. You can also come up with your own GIS layers and then layer the layers that they have on this GeoGem tool onto the layers that you create. So you can do your own sort of thing that you would like to do. So really cool federal resources. Now we'll just quickly go into the EC resources, which are equally as cool, of course. So our drive tool is our most used tool. I think we've assessed over 1.4 million vehicles. What we need for you is really simple. We need a VIN, a vehicle identification number. We need the annual miles and the years, the projected year of use for the replacement of that vehicle. And then once we get that information, it pulls from that whatever area that you're from, and it will take regional data to determine what the total cost of ownership is for the vehicles that you're looking to replace. Again, it gives you an internal combustion engine vehicle price and a electric vehicle price, and it will give you what the most attractive EV replacement vehicles are. You can see it right here real quickly, what the top 5 passenger vehicles to procure are. Again, this is something that's super useful. We work with cities all the time on it. And if you are interested in it, we can certainly go through, we can work with you on it. We've got funding to do that, but we can also show you how to use it so that you can use it yourself. This is the Drive EV Fleets. This was the procurement thing that I was talking about, where we partner with Sourcewell. So you can see, you can browse available light duty electric vehicles. This is the banks that I was talking about. So if there's a particular vehicle that you're interested in it and they matches the banks that are open, you can competitively procure without going through any other procurement strategies that you have to do from a municipal level, and therefore make the transition a little bit easier. And then finally, we get to the Electrification Municipalities Playbook. So this is a playbook that we came out with in, I believe it was February, and it comes at a great time for municipalities. As the new administration halts some of that federal funding that we were talking about, many cities are asking themselves, what can we do next? There are entities who are relying on awards that have been given to them. They've been keen on winning federal money, but now they're more apprehensive than ever to commit to EVs because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And that's where the EC thought that we could come in. We felt it was important to illustrate some of the things that are still moving forward, projects that are still getting completed, and cities that can implement EV-related projects. So, many cities have like a climate plan or a transportation plan, and it's already been approved by councils or board members. And so we want to be able to work with, these cities that are still interested in moving forward with their climate action plans or their transportation plans. And these are some of the ways that this is happening. So what the EC has done is broken down these actions into 4 categories. You can see charging, freight, fleet, and consumer. And as you can see, each of these categories are broken down kind of similar to what the joint office was, because I really enjoyed their framework for their that federal tool that we started off with. And then each subcategory gives a short summary of how to proceed on moving forward. And then you can see that there's right here that there's case studies and additional insights that we have pulled. Most of these are recent cases, so there's a few that occurred outside of 2023 and before, but most of them are 2023 and after. We really wanted to make sure that these are all up to date. We also have, so there's, the charging, freight, fleets, and consumer works the very same way. And then I also wanted to mention that we do have at the very bottom of this a variety of different additional resources that you can use related to policy, planning, procurement, and partnerships, the 4Ps. And one of the things I wanted to point out, and this is the last hyperlink that I added in the chat, is the Achieve guides. So the Achieve guides are more equity based on both electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure. So we wanted to make sure that, we incorporate that, into our planning. Of course, with much of the city examples, equity always plays a major role in, climate action plans and transportation plans. So we didn't feel the need to necessarily highlight it in the municipality playbook, but it is everywhere. It is found in every example that we have. This playbook has gotten a lot of fanfare and a lot of positive feedback over the course of the last couple of months. We are very intentional on how this resource was formatted. So our first iteration, we were going to do a PDF version, but we thought about that there's so many projects out there that deserve highlighting, and we don't want to keep on going back and re-PDFing everything. So this is why we created a website. And so if there is any projects that you think that should be added to it, we would be more than happy to add the projects. We have already added 4 to 5 projects based on, people coming and say, hey, we would love to have our project that we had in this section be highlighted. So it's a really great resource that you can use to move forward. And we're excited to continue to highlight it for communities such as yours. Please feel free to reach out to the Electrification Coalition. You can reach out directly to me, or you can find our general information on our website. And happy to be able to talk to you. So thank you.
Thanks, Brandt. That was great. I think if folks take nothing away from this, it's that you do not have to recreate the wheel, and you do not have to do this in a vacuum. There are so many resources available. Really excited to welcome Andy Kilpatrick with the City of Lansing to give a perspective of a community that's taking great action to advance equitable electrification. Andy, thanks so much for being here.
Great, thank you. So I guess my first slide will actually have my contact information if you want to, put that up on anyone who wants to contact us. So the city's kind of background on electrification so far is we have a whopping 5 vehicles in our fleet that are full electric, and we are looking at more the medium and heavy duty, but it's difficult to find things that are going to meet all of our needs kind of at the price point currently. We did have a project outside of our current one to put EV charging in a number of our parking structures and community centers, and that was kind of a good preview of maybe what the challenges might be as we move forward. And one of the big ones that we found was trying to figure out what rate we should set, and whether that rate should actually be on a kind of per use kilowatt hour basis, or if it should be on an hourly basis. And so actually we went to council to have approved both of them. And right now we're basing it on use. And then if we see if that's an issue, we might do an hourly, so that people who are in the parking structure all day don't just decide they're charged for 2 hours or so, but be there the entire day and take that away from everyone. So that's kind of one thing that we're looking at as we move forward with our CFI grant. And I think, as has been mentioned previously, many folks are apprehensive on what's happening at the federal level. And we just had a call last week with our DOT rep who said, hey, you guys are fine for your first half, which is our kind of planning, pre-NEPA and outreach education. But once you get to the amendment for your next part for implementation, you may have a problem. So we're trying to, navigate that and kind of figure out, once we get to implementation, if we can continue with the model that we were thinking about, which was a publicly owned and maybe publicly operated, or if we might have to go to more partnership model or a pure private model that we have oversight over. So anyway, that's a little background. If you want to go to the next slide. So this, people probably already know this, but this for us, I think, is when we do our education and outreach, is important to know, just based on the demographics of people who currently have EVs and who we might hope to incentivize to purchase EVs. So not maybe surprising, especially with some of the early EVs that came out being, very expensive, but male, high income, highly educated, and this is important, homeowners with multiple vehicles and access to charging at home. So when we get into some of the need for for charging, public charging, it's more important if people don't have the option to charge at home, and also if it's their primary vehicle, because reliability is obviously a huge concern. If you have one charger, maybe with 2 charging ports, and the whole charger is down, and you're relying on that charger to be able to get home, you're kind of stuck, or you have to make different plans. So 75% male, 87% white, and kind of here's a sort of key one that even though vehicle purchases, 41% Black and Hispanic, only 12% of EV purchases are by Black and Hispanic. So people of color are more likely to be affected by both charging prices, more than 3 times, availability of charger, and the charging times. And some of that may go back to sort of what's at the top there. If you have access to charging at home and have multiple vehicles, then the kind of public charging or not at home charging becomes much more significant. Next slide. This, we're not going to get into politics, but it's just interesting. Again, if you're trying to market to people or just understand what your audience might be, and it depending on if you're kind of a more heavily Republican area or Democrat, it may influence that, but you can see that is a much higher percentage of Republicans, at least in this survey, who would not choose an EV, which may reflect maybe some of the changes at the federal level right now. So again, not delving into that, but there is a distinction between parties there, at least based on what this was, when this was done. And this was done by Blue Labs, which had some Democratic Party folks. There might be a little bit of bias, but based on the questions asked, I think it's at least representative, even if the percentages aren't exact. Next one. And again, this is just shows, again, the split there, but on Democrats, no matter where they were, they are, more likely, whether it's definitely or might choose an EV, to go that direction versus Republican, which is a much lower percentage, whether it's an urban area or all the way to rural. Rural, again, as we talk about availability of charging, makes sense. But even on the urban side, you can see that it's much lower on the Republican. Those are, Republically affiliated. Next slide. And then in race, and this was highlighted in the website. I didn't highlight the little white part there, but you can see that, and this may reflect kind of Republican, urban, rural, but a higher percentage of whites reporting not choosing an EV, even though you can see the split when we looked at parties. So that was at least surprising to me that if you look across all demographics, there's a larger percentage of the whites that identified not wanting to choose an EV for whatever reason is. Next. Most of you guys know all this, so I'm not going to delve into this too much, but advantages, obviously, on the operating costs, maintenance costs, lower, quieter, and that gets into more on the kind of the environmental side. I didn't want to say that it is no pollution, because depending on where the electricity is coming from, there may be still pollution, especially if you're talking about, coal power plant providing your electricity for your EV, but at least on, point source emissions, they don't have those. And then kind of overall more environmentally friendly. But disadvantages, as we kind of know, higher upfront costs, which the first slide, or one of the first slides, that talked about being higher income levels, kind of that plays in there. And then kind of end of life, at least currently, high battery replacement costs. So if you're, have an issue with your normal vehicle, unless it's an engine, it's maybe not a huge cost, but end of life for an EV, if that battery goes, you're pretty much dead in the water until you get that replaced. There are environmental concerns with both production and disposal of batteries, even though there are end of life solutions that are not in the vehicles. And we've all heard talk of, rare earth elements and the batteries, but I think that will kind of work itself out as we find different types of batteries. This is what I found interesting when I was looking this up. Depending on where you are in the country and what your electric grid is like right now, if you would have high adoption rates for EVs, and especially probably on the heavy duty side, there might be some grid reliability issues if pretty much everyone's trying to charge at the same time, whether it's day or night. And then obviously kind of the range issue, if there's lack of charging infrastructure, and then also depending on, the capacity of your vehicle and where you're charging, takes longer for most vehicles to get from 0 to full capacity than it does to put gas in any type of vehicle. Next one. And so here's where we start to look at the project that we are looking at, both, starting with the operational considerations. And so the first one, if you're looking at kind of private or public charging, the need and type of charger needs to match what that kind of the area is. And if you're doing a full network, need to have all DC fast charging level 3 chargers. It could be a combination, or if there are fast chargers nearby, maybe you need just level 2, and then the number depends on kind of what the demand is going to be. Part of that also on the need is, again, if everyone has a home charger, then whether that's level 1 or level 2, they might not have the same type of need for the public charger as they would. Whereas if you're, say, in an apartment building or you have nothing at home, then you need that. That is your charging, full charging possibility. The use or demand, that's really on the financial side. We need to look to make sure that at least on an entire network, that the chargers that we would put out there, they will pay for themselves. Because at least in the city, what we're looking at this is an amenity, but we're not in the business of, say, providing free gas cards to people, and we're not going to provide, free electric charging. We're not looking to make money, but we want to make sure that overall our network would break even, including replacement costs for those chargers. So if we were a private company, we would say, well, we're going to sort of cherry pick the areas that we would put chargers in. We're looking at what the need is and trying to match that with the implementation, but make sure there is sufficient use at the price point that we put in place so that the whole system does break even. We've had some areas where we look at like the panel and the grid, where we're tying these into buildings, and we might want to put a higher number of chargers in place, but unless we upgrade the electrical panel or even the service for that location, then we can't do that. So we've had to sort of downgrade either the chargers, the speed of the charger we put in, or the number to be able to match that so that we're doing it most cost effectively as possible. And kind of overall with I think we had like about 20 charging heads that we put in place. Our cost was about $8,000 per charging head. And we put that in with the assistance of our local utility, which I think got some VW emissions kind of settlement money that allowed us to put those in at fairly low cost to everyone. So the other thing on the public side is the cost to consumer. And on the city side, we were looking at that as right now, it's just a single price, but in the future, we might look at it where we have a low income cost, or we might have it. So if we have it at a school, they might decide that for their employees during the day, they want to have a lower cost for their employees, but then at night, it's a different cost when it's truly available to the public. And then on the operating side, kind of briefly mentioned this, if federal funding goes away for implementation of charging infrastructure, we might look at a partnership where the city or municipality might still want to own the charger, but we want to have a private operator take care of maintenance and possibly, other things there. Or we might look at an entire network and we have a private operator come in, but they have to do everything in the area, not just looking at the locations that might make money. But on the private side, it's easier if you're, charging at home. I put in there, the need, because so I have a plug-in hybrid, but I don't need a level 2 charger because it only gets 20 miles on the charge and it charges 4 to 5 hours. So really, if I charge overnight, I'm fine by the morning. So why would I spend the money to potentially upgrade my panel or put in a level 2 charger that's going to charge it twice as fast when this current rate is sufficient? And that may be the case for many people at home as well, depending on the type of vehicle they buy and whether they have one or maybe multiple. And then going into that is the capital cost. Again, why would you spend a lot of money for that level 2 charger if just a regular plug-in that comes with your car is sufficient? Another capital cost or even potential is if your panel would not support level 2 charging, then or the wiring you have, then it really becomes more expensive. And that we'll see already in Lansing, when we have older homes where people say, I'd love to be able to charge at home, but I can't put anything else on my panel. I've got a 7,500-year-old house, and maybe I only have a 50 amp panel to start with. And so that's a barrier right now, not being able to upgrade that. And then again, the electric rate, sometimes there's special, EV charging rates, or it's, lower cost at night or off peak. So that's something to consider. All right, next one. So and these are, not operational considerations, but, whether putting in charging stations in a certain area potentially could increase traffic to that area, and the community that is put in does not benefit from it. So if you get a lot of extra traffic and no one in the community, or it could be like a neighborhood, actually has an EV charger, then they're going to see the increased traffic, no benefit for them personally or their community. If you have it at a store potentially, and it's provided as a service, and they don't recover the full cost of that, then that's something that everyone is paying, which could disproportionately, fall on those with lower incomes. I saw a study, I think it was for Kohl's, that they said, anytime they put in an EV charger, they're getting more than that back in additional revenue, because people either shop longer because they want to wait until their vehicle is charged, or they will spend money and come in specifically, for the charger that's there. There's also the potential for air quality benefits and noise benefits for wealthier communities if they have EVs, that then disproportionately falls on those communities that might not be able to get the EVs because they still have the kind of noise from regular vehicles, and they see detriment to the air quality because they don't have the EVs. Then potentially you might have, say, a convenience store with a gas station, that if it goes out of business, there are jobs that are flowing out of their dollars out of the community, especially if you have, say, private charging that's owned by someone else, and all the revenue from that leaves the community as well. Next slide. For equity and justice, these are just kind of different types of things to look at. Kind of recognition justice, where when we look at this, we know that there are groups and individuals that are affected by existing inequities. And some of this, like in Lansing, we had multiple roads and freeways put in that displaced historically African-American communities, and they're still suffering inequities. And we want to make sure that we don't do something else as we're looking at EVs that will not benefit people proportionally, or kind of take care of some of those inequities. There's distributional justice, where you look at inequities across locations and demographics, and that could look at, say you had charging that is across the entire community, but folks don't have chargers or have EVs, then they can't charge there, so that benefit does not go to them. If it's not affordable to them, whether they have access or not, then they still can't make use of that. And then as we get into looking at how we would put our chargers and the network in place, we want to make sure there's input from the community. But this is really important. You don't want just the community to include those that have EVs now. So you could do a survey that says, EV users, where do you think you need charging? But if you're not looking at the community that doesn't have access to that, if they were to get an EV, then you're going to put chargers in different locations. You may price things differently than you would if you had true community input. And then, restorative justice would be just improving conditions of the communities that were impacted by inequity over time, to make sure that you are giving them a benefit to, whether it's generational wealth to kind of improve that, or other benefits that, would improve their quality of life for their community. Next one. Here's some solutions, and I think these are, already kind of touched on with some of the other information was provided, but ensure the community is part of the decision-making. So it's not just our study and our experts, people that have implemented elsewhere, but that you do get true community impact, or decisions, so you have the impact. And that is difficult, because a lot of the times when you reach out to community, if you do it a traditional way, you'll get the same people that respond to any kind of survey or come to any public meeting. And the ones you might really want to hear from are the ones that don't show up there. So you may have to have different ways to outreach to people. And then to implement an operating and ownership model that also benefits the city or community, because we could put in something now that, again, could make money for a private owner, but that's not what we want. So we want to be able to kind of control that, just so we can control pricing and control where these stations would be located and make sure that there is a benefit for the entire community. This next one should be, say, place chargers based on need and use. So, areas where people have at-home charging, they might like to have a charger nearby when they're going shopping, but do they actually need one? Where there are some communities, maybe it's an apartment building or areas where the panels in the house can't support the needed charging. They have a greater need for that. So we look at that, but then based on use, if you put the charger out there and only one person is using it, that's not really economically viable if you're looking at an entire system. So you need to make sure that the use is there and the revenue is generated to support the entire charging network. It's also a possibility that if you're looking at charging stations, that it could be a catalyst for other transportation solutions on the electric side, e-bikes, scooters, EV car share that might be right at a charging location, so people don't have access to any car. They can have an EV, and hopefully, since the maintenance costs are lower, that's something that otherwise we might not have been able to do if it were electric or non-electric vehicle. Also, if the grid's an issue, consider solar or storage to reduce the impacts on the electric grid. And then for other kind of, I'll say, co-benefits of having EV charging, work with a community college or your local school system for some job training program for the jobs that will be around EV charging, whether it's the construction or maintenance. And then we're also looking at an EV charging or charger ordinance. So different levels, we can make sure that you're charger ready, so your panel is in there, or if you have a parking lot, say for an apartment building or a store, at least you put the conduit in. So when you see that need there, then you're not to have to rip out everything out and it's more expensive. And the other one would be kind of, and some communities already have this, that it's actually required that when you put in, whether it's again, retail or apartments, you have some type of charger that is there for people who otherwise might not have a charger on site and have to rely on public chargers that could be more expensive. I believe that is the last slide. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's really nice to hear from someone who's undergoing a large project and all of the considerations that go into it from the local level. I also appreciate highlighting that there are some real challenges still, and early movers are figuring a lot of that out. And again, all of the resources that we're sharing today can help folks expedite the process and learn from those who have gone before them. So with that, I'm really excited to welcome Mona Munroe-Younis with the Environmental Transformation Movement of Flint. So Mona, I will pull your slides up and hand it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Yes, I'm Mona Munroe-Younis, and I'm a Flint resident. I also lead an environmental justice organization that Jane just mentioned, Environmental Transformation Movement of Flint. So I'm bringing an environmental justice angle to the conversation as well. And I'm also bringing experience as a neighborhood planner formerly at the City of Flint. And also I serve on the City Planning Commission. So I just wear a number of hats that kind of inform my perspective. But I think it's really important to start, and I'll be brief because I know we want time to have Q&A. But I also wanted to offer like a definition for what is EV equity. And in the Equitable EV Action Planning document, it recommends customizing this definition, but it's kind of a starting place for communities so that if you can define what you're looking for, you can be more intentional about planning for equity in that planning process. So building on the Green Lining Institute's definition of mobility equity, the Equitable EV Action Plan provides a customizable definition for EV equity as an electric vehicle transition that increases access to community, appropriate mobility options, and affordable vehicle charging, reduces air pollution, and enhances economic opportunity for priority populations. And these would include, as others have discussed, and not limited to, folks who are in underserved communities, Black and Brown communities, low-income communities, people with disabilities, students and seniors, and being very intentional about their needs as well. And I always like to use this graphic. Hopefully everybody already understands the concept that we have built-in inequities in our society, right? And so that is the current reality. Equality would mean everybody just gets what they need to get by, but equity means giving what they need. So that could, in the planning process, that could mean putting more energy and resources in planning in underserved areas so that you're undoing the effects of redlining, for example. You're undoing the effects of historic inequities so that everybody can be lifted up. And then liberation is removing the barriers completely, which is what we want to do, because what we're planning for with this EV transformation really is it's a big shift. And we're not going to have equity, and we're not going to be able to clean our environment and have a more sustainable world for generations to come if we're leaving people behind. So who's this for? It's for all of us, right? It's for all of us. And the transformation can't happen if we're not being intentional and we're leaving people behind. Next slide, please. I have a lot of background in effective community engagement, so I wanted to bring that lens today. One of the things that I think is really important is that community engagement is not just checking a box. If you want good planning, if you want planning that has buy-in from local communities, residents, from community-based organizations that could be providing letters of support when you go after federal funding, you're gonna want to be really intentional and understand that when community members are bringing their expertise to the table, that it is an expertise. It's not just I'm sharing my perspective. Lived experience is expertise. So also, if you want that kind of buy-in and you want people to feel welcome and really authentically part of a planning process, it's important to engage residents and community stakeholders early, often, and iteratively. And then one of the things that I found really effective in Flint, and I think is true whether you're in an urban area, suburban, or rural, is that we're being intentional about integrating community education and planning. So, for example, in Flint, like people are not really tuned in right now to climate change and climate justice. It's just we've been so focused on the water and dealing with addressing other inequities that this is kind of a newer conversation in Flint. And so I'm part of a team with Kettering University, local communities-based partners, and of course my organization, to do a project called Climate Resilient Flint. And so what we're doing is we're bringing people to the table to do on-the-ground projects related to climate change resiliency, but we're also doing workshops so that people are being educated and then are in a better position to be advocating for community change in a really informed way. And I think that that's a parallel with EV planning, right? Because you have like we show, like Andy showed, certain demographics that are already, kind of participating in the spread of EVs, but a whole lot of people just aren't there yet for a number of reasons. And so it's really important to educate people to be able to bring them along. Because if we're not doing that and just we're doing kind of like business as usual, we hope people show up, but we're not really making an intentional effort, we will be leaving people behind. And then what I found is that people get really excited and they want to be part of the change once they understand the importance and how to make it actually happen in their own community. So just being really intentional about pairing education with planning. Another thing that is very effective is to do community mapping. And Brandt spoke of the GEM tool, the Geospatial Energy Mapper. You could print out on a large scale, maps of either your wards or neighborhoods of your community, and have people from that area brainstorm and use dots or something so it's interactive. Where would I put an EV charging station that would have the greatest benefit and meet community needs? It makes it more interactive and fun. When you're a municipal planner, you can take that back with you and that can inform your decision making. And you also want to have that side by side with a trusted a steering committee based out of with people from the community who are trusted, right? Who are guiding your community engagement effort. I'm a big supporter of bottom-up organizing because top-down just doesn't create the buy-in and it does not create the best solution. So if you take some time to read the EV action plan, it doesn't use the language of bottom-up organizing, but it really talks about how to create like an equitable process in a more integrated way. And again, I just want to reinforce bottom-up is meaning like, you know, you're engaging your neighborhood association partners as partners in that planning effort. It's not just show up, but hey, let's work together and figure out how to make this community engagement opportunity the most effective, you know, building off of the knowledge you have from within the neighborhood. Invite people to the table to be part of developing the planning process. And of course, engaging all neighborhoods and sectors, including being mindful of both single family and multifamily housing, as well as, you know, we talked about, you know, thinking about engaging shopping areas and community centers, service providers, being really intentional about where EV charging stations will go. Next slide, please. Okay, so this may go without saying, but I think it's worth being really, again, intentional about, because EV and climate change work and just thinking about a just transition to a more restorative economy based on the shifts we need in society, you know, to respond to climate change. We want to be really careful to use language that brings people along instead of alienating them. So, you know, use common language, don't use a lot of jargon, but when you have to use new terms, define it. Make it easy for people to participate and not get left behind. And then the other thing that I found really helpful, whether it's talking about electric vehicles or talking about climate change, or really, you know, any kind of community planning effort you want to see, is to frame why you're coming together and why you're doing the planning in terms of what matters to people. So if I just walk out in the street and I start talking to somebody about climate change, they might be like, okay. But if I start talking about how, you know, we want to take steps to make our air safer, to make it easier to breathe, because we know that we have got a lot of folks in our community with asthma, and there's high asthma hospitalization rates, and that's making life less affordable for people, and it's a stressor. Then you start to get people's attention. We want to create more affordable transportation options and make it easier for people to have lower long-term costs to have a private vehicle, or to be able to tap into rideshare, for example. That gets people's attention. And then convenience, of course, is perks people's ears up. And then talking about leaving the environment better for our children, grandkids, and future generations. Next slide, please. Okay, and then finally, I just want to share a few examples about how to integrate equity and justice into your planning. The blue chart is a takeout from the plan. I'm not going to go into all of it because I know we're getting close to time, but just be really intentional about having your planning sessions, not just in the downtown, not just at your city hall or township hall, but throughout the community. Make it easy for people geographically to access those meetings. Also access in terms of what time are you holding the meetings. You know, lunchtime, evening times, weekends tend to be better. Go where people already are. You know, be intentional about building community benefit agreements so that there's a ripple effect of investment that comes from your EV planning and implementation, especially in areas that have been historically disinvested. I think Andy also talked about green job creation and training programs, being very intentional about making sure that under-resourced populations are benefiting from that and being connected in. And then finally, I've already said this, but just investing in historically underinvested areas and neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mona. I really appreciate your perspective and the tangible tools for how to do this in a way that's really informed by the community. We have reached the end of the hour. I know we promised some question and answer time, but I think you'll all agree that we couldn't have done this without any of our speakers. And so I'm very grateful for the time and insights that they've provided. And I volunteer as tribute to answer any questions that you have